By the sounds of that piano playing, it must be time to start the show. You're watching Talking Point live here, coming to you live from the studios of the Community Education Channel on campus of Dixie State University's campus. Not to repeat myself,
in the CEC studios. Did you say that yet? Okay, good.
All that kind of stuff. And it should be noted that the views and opinions expressed on the show are only ours. They don't reflect anybody else's.
That's right.
As far as we know.
Right.
Right. Certainly not the university, certainly not the CEC, not anybody in the booth. It boils down to you and I. Hi. It's nice to see you. We took a couple of weeks off.
We did. We had spring break.
Spring break going on. Eric Young is my name. This is Jen Kohler. You had a nice little cruise.
I did for my daughter's 40th birthday.
Wow. Oh,
Way fun.
Very good.
Yep.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we are talking about our privacy and Facebook and...
Wait a minute, those two words don't belong in the same sentence.
Good point.
According to all the brouhaha that's been going on
Yes.
about Facebook and privacy.
Yes, what to do about this.
You're not particularly alarmed by this because you're not really a Facebooker.
You know, I would like to think so, but we both know better, don't we? Because if I've ever liked anything or ever signed in with Facebook to another app, I'm a Facebooker.
So do you use Facebook to sign in to other apps?
I do sometimes when it's convenient to say sign in with Facebook.
Yeah, and that's just it. It makes it really convenient to do it that way. But in doing so, you end up surrendering your data if you're using that. Jen's found a video here that shows you how to go through and delete your account, and we're going to discover today that's probably not all that easy to do so. Because we're working with social networking. It's not just social media anymore. Just by going through and adding a friend or you being added to another friend's network, you're into that entire network. So you might be able to delete your own account, but your information is still accessible by all those other accounts around you, not to mention all the accounts that you might have used your Facebook sign-in information to log into those other apps that you might be using. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about Cambridge Analytica and what that means in terms of our data and how we become manipulated. Especially at a time as crucial as, say, the 2016 presidential elections.
And why does it matter?
Why does it matter? It matters a lot. So we've got a lot of information to cover today to get into. Where do you want to start? How do we kick this off?
Well,
you want to go with the Cambridge Analytica story first?
Yeah, let's do that, because that might lead some people to be interested in deleting Facebook if they haven't already. So let's start with Cambridge.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, cart before the horse here. Let's get into Cambridge Analytica. So 2 Fridays ago, a certain whistleblower, a guy by the name of Christopher Wiley, decided, I think we've got an image of him, decided to come clean. He felt pretty bad about the manipulation of certain types of media, certain types of data that Facebook allowed to be accessed. And this was done relatively innocently enough in terms of it was an academic research project by a teacher who teaches at Cambridge University in Great Britain, who also happens to be Russian. He's a Russian American. This is an interesting sidebar to this. We'll come back to that here in just a minute. But he wanted access to certain types of data from Facebook in order to go through and see what kind of algorithms could gather together, what kind of data, and to be analyzed to see maybe somebody's political predisposition. And that's all fine and good on an academic level in terms of research, okay? But somebody else came along.
Right. So it went from Facebook to the researcher and then to a third party. Is that right?
Right. Well, the third party was Cambridge Analytica.
Okay.
And this was a company that was formed initially by a very wealthy Republican donor. His name was Robert Mercer. And then another more familiar name came into play here, another guy by the name of Steve Bannon.
Yes.
As Cambridge Analytica. He's the one who formed the name for Cambridge Analytica, and they became the data analytics for the Trump campaign. And what I mean by data analytics is they're the ones who are able to go through and look into your personal Facebook account and see kind of where you were politically, where you might fall on some kind of a political spectrum. Are you, at the time, were you curious about Hillary? Did you have some misgivings? Did you go through and post, well, I'm not too sure about Hillary Clinton? Because if you did,
or I hate Hillary,
or I hate Hillary, or I hate Bernie Sanders, or anything, any kind of opinion that you might have posted out there, has semantic information, and that semantic information is read by an algorithm that can go through and detect where you fall on this spectrum, on this political spectrum. So if you happen to fall on the fence somewhere and you're kind of leaning towards misgivings towards a certain candidate, and if that candidate happened to be Hillary Clinton, because Cambridge Analytica worked for Donald Trump, not only were these data geeks, were these programmers and going through and taking a look at this, they have producers and photographers and directors, people putting together campaign ads that then they would feed into your Facebook network, into your Facebook wall, your thread, and eliminate maybe any doubts you might have had about Hillary Clinton's character.
Now, why is this big news? I mean, isn't this exactly what President Obama's 2008 campaign did?
And both campaigns did it that way, but he was open with the concept of what they were doing with the media.
Oh, so
what they were doing with the data.
More upfront or transparent about.
Nor did they go through and take that data and use that to form new media to then go through and feed into users' Facebook feeds, targeting them specifically,
right.
To go through and discredit an opponent.
So you're saying there's a difference in how social media was used in 08, and then 12,
From my study,
and then in 16.
The difference was that the Obama campaign really opened up a dialogue between voters and his campaign.
Okay.
For example, when he switched positions on FISA. He originally ran on a platform that he was against the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and then when he reconsidered some holes within the national security, he decided perhaps that was something that we needed.
Okay.
Agree or disagree, that's the decision that he made, and he made that during the campaign. And when he made that decision, went public with it, his My Barack Obama Facebook page just blew up with people who were like, no, you told us that you weren't going to do that.
Right.
And he turned around and said, well, let me tell you why. So he created a dialogue with that. So it wasn't so much this concept of data mining and seeing who had certain political dispositions.
Okay.
It was, let's get some information back and forth.
So
let's get a dialogue
it's actually quite different from what you're describing in 2016, 8 years later.
Right.
Okay.
I should note as well that this isn't anything new. In 2011, I worked with a developer in creating an algorithm that does just this. It goes through and looks at how you are doing and what your opinions are and how you're feeling.
Yeah, I was thinking about your adventures earlier today when I was listening to.
It's no different.
Yeah.
And anybody who's ever used Gmail, if you've ever searched on Amazon for something and then it pops up in your feed on Facebook, you know that this goes on all the time. So this isn't anything new. But here's the rub on this, and that is what is done with that data that goes through and is indicative of your profile, of what your political leanings, or any kind of leaning for that matter, might be.
So there's a line. You're saying there's a line that maybe got crossed this last time that we're now aware of, and we were not aware before.
Well, let's go back a little bit in time. You know, we started becoming enamored in the late '90s with this whole internet idea of being able to use some type of an aggregator or a curation algorithm that would go through and pick all those things that you might be specifically interested in, and then it would feed it to you. Okay. Basically, that's what Google's algorithm does. It keeps track of what you take a look at, and then it feeds you more of that kind
in your search results, when you're searching.
Later on, we discovered that kind of becomes an echo chamber. It's starting to feed us the stuff that we were already going to agree with, or that's not going to challenge us.
A kind of a filter bubble.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we like that, because we became confirmed within our own intrinsic biases.
Okay.
Oh, somebody else feels that way about it, so I must be validated in terms of how I feel. And that wasn't a bad thing, especially if you happen to be selling something. And if you're dealing with somebody who is brand loyal or brand specific, well, then why not just feed them more of that brand?
Okay, I like that you're saying that filter bubbles aren't necessarily bad, that they have some positive uses. And I want to come, or maybe you're not saying that, but I want to come back to that topic.
I'm trying to keep evaluation out of this, good or bad. There, what's important?
Why?
Because that's your department. We'll leave that up to you.
Okay.
Because it's important that we understand how this works before we go through and make the evaluation. with that.
Right.
So here we have the ability to have stuff fed to us, where before, when election time rolled around, if you wanted to know somebody's political platform, you read it on your Washington County Republicans' little book that came out, or the Democrats, or whatever, you know, or you researched, you went out and you listened to debates, and you read material, you read pamphlets that were left on your doorstep. And you went and got the information, and then you digested that information on whatever level, and then you went into the booth and you pulled the lever, right? You decided what to do. Now, those who are subscribed to any kind of social media, that's not the case. You're not going out to you. It's coming in. It's coming. Let me rephrase that. Let me try that again. You're not going out after it. It's coming back after you.
Right.
And it's been framed by somebody who knows how to influence you, who knows how to persuade you.
And it's not necessarily objective information, unbiased. It's actually very, very biased.
Well, that's why the Trump
time.
administration contracted with Cambridge Analytica to go through and do what they did.
Okay.
Of course, it's biased.
Okay.
And that's the problem. That's where it becomes.
Because me as the consumer, if I'm just relying on that information and not going out and seeking information, but I'm just consuming what's fed to me, force-fed to me, really in a way, without even thinking about the level of bias or manipulation, why is that bad again? Well, because, I'm supposed to be making an informed decision as a voter in a democratic republic, right?
Not just in a democratic republic.
Okay.
Cambridge Analytica is guilty of doing this not just with the Trump campaign, but with dozens of campaigns worldwide. The chief executive officer of Cambridge Analytica has been caught bragging on videotape by an investigation by The Guardian, where they're complicit in going through and influencing the democratic processes in a number of elections across the world. And that's problematic.
Yeah. Yes.
That's where you're getting into. It's totally counterintuitive to the whole democratic process. Why we aren't up in arms about this, why we aren't rioting in the streets with pitchforks and torches at the White House speaks to the complacency of the American voter at this point. We've been manipulated.
We don't seem to mind very much about it.
Because we're placated with
all these perks.
Benefits
that
of
come
social
to
media,
us, right? Because
social
it
networking
makes our lives very convenient for us, and we don't have. Think of all the time you're saving by just letting the news come to you. You don't have to go out and look for it. Think of all the time you're saving that you now can use for other things that you find pleasurable or important.
Like scrolling through your Facebook feed. I mean, honestly, how much more time would I have during a day?
Yeah, I'm wondering. We're so often talking about being on diets. I wonder if we should put ourselves on. Well, the media diet. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. My students actually, I know. Diet. They actually do a media fast for 48 hours and find it quite an interesting experience.
I have students who are incapable of even doing it.
Yes.
I have they can't do anything digital at all. So that might be more prohibitive to them.
Yes, that would be.
So what have we said so far?
All right, so to recap a little, summarize, we talked about Cambridge Analytica's role in promoting the Republican candidate in the last presidential election.
Promoting. That's an interesting term.
And we're thinking it was pretty powerful, the way they did the targeted ads. And now, are they part of they're not part of the group, the troll group that creates fake users to amplify negative messages.
No,
that's
that was
a separate arm of information.
Was, as investigations are revealing, a concerted Russian effort to go through and create those types of groups as well.
Not only Russian, but we have Americans that buy in.
We do, yes.
We have Americans that buy into certain ideas.
Actually, though, it's not becoming that cut and dried in terms of figuring out, because we're discovering that many of those American trolls were actually done through this concerted Russian effort to go through and undermine the democratic process in the United States.
You mean they're bots?
They're bots.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So you have the bots that are not actual people, but then you also do have some Americans that have opinions that are then amplified by the bots.
Right.
So they're almost unwilling or willing dupes, if you will, or tools being manipulated.
Right. It's willful negligence because they're not critical, and those who are putting opinions out there, they're not. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. They're not doing their homework, or they're just responding to a meme, or they too have been manipulated on some level because not only did Cambridge Analytica go through and play with those who were on the fence, they certainly went through and reinforced those who were in the trenches in terms of Trump's base.
Let me ask you something. If you're convinced that your position is right, so maybe you're somebody like Steve Bannon, and you have a ideological position, and you're convinced you're right, is it really so bad to simplify a conversation, polarize people, utilize the social network?
You're being devil's advocate here, right? I just want to understand, because who are you and what did you do with Jen Koehler?
I'm just saying that it's tempting to think that if you have the right point of view, whatever tools are at your disposal, you'd be an idiot not to use them. If you're convinced you're right, why wouldn't you use every angle to win the day if in fact you think you're saving your society, your country?
Well, you teach discourse, public discourse. What does that do to what does the entrenched position do to the whole debate?
But here we have important things at stake. I mean, maybe because the average American is busy earning a living and doing X, Y, and Z, they don't have time to educate themselves. But certain people, let's keep using Steve Bannon, he's educated on a point, he has a point of view, he's convinced it's right. So he's just cutting through all the clutter and getting to the American voter and saying, look, in many different ways, either using bots or not.
See, look, we're going to dismantle democracy as we knew it, as it was founded.
To save it. Because people can't vote for the wrong person. They have to vote for the right person, and so much is at stake. We can't horse around with
you're putting his efforts right up there with the founders of the Constitution.
Well,
then.
You're
is
saying
that what you're trying to make a parallel to?
Thomas Paine, right?
Yes, of course. I love Thomas Paine.
You do, but he was.
Don't put him in the same boat as Steve Bannon. We're going to come to blows here if you do that.
Just saying, he had a very clear message that was pretty one-sided. It was, we need to fight, we need to overthrow the monarchy, and I'm going to ride through the colonies, I'm going to whip up the masses, and we're going to get ourselves an army, and that's all I'm up to because it's do or die. I'm going to simplify. We're not having a lot of philosophical discourse now. It's time to go to arms.
And by today's standards, he was a millennial.
How so?
Well, he was young.
Yes, he was.
They all were. And that can take us off in a different direction. So you're arguing that, well, isn't this just part of the democratic process? Is that what you're saying?
We all know that democracy is really.
Can we go through and fault anybody for not using these tools to go through and get their point across?
I think I would put the majority of the blame on the consumer, meaning us, as the voter and the purchaser of goods.
So we've got the government we deserve then?
I think so. I think it's a reflection on who we are as people and as a culture. So if we're willing to take the easy way and the convenient way, click on join through Facebook, for example, or just have the news feed, give us the food, eat whatever is served to us without reading the label and looking at the ingredients, then we're going to be obese.
Right.
We're going to have diabetes, we're going to have health problems, and our minds are going to be full of high fructose corn syrup and
polyunsaturated fats,
highly refined carbs, and blah blah blah.
I'm gonna see if I have anybody chiming in here.
So really, I'm not a fan of lying to get my way. Okay, or misrepresenting the truth. I'm not advocating that they should do that. I can see why they do it, and I can see how effective it is. So it's really up to me as a consumer to pay attention to the messaging.
So you have a little clip that talks about how to go through and delete your Facebook account there, and how maybe that's not going to completely delete what's
Not
going
only will it not work, but it might not be the right thing to try to do anyway.
Well, let's take a look at that.
Okay.
Because there's some interesting points that he makes through that in terms of, well, if you give it a shot, it might not go through and delete you altogether.
Yeah. What's involved in that?
Go ahead and roll that. Let's take a look.
Okay.
If you look at the delete Facebook hashtag, people are really angry, and I think they're sort of becoming aware of the extent to which they're being watched and tracked. This feels like it's a turning point for many of the people who use Facebook and aren't happy about how their data is being used, and the more they find out, the less happy they are. I think people underestimate how hard it is to untangle ourselves from a social network like Facebook. So before you delete your Facebook account, just remember that it's not just Facebook that you'll be losing access to. It's also all of the third-party apps that you use Facebook to log into or that are connected or plugged into your Facebook account. So it's important before you make this choice to go through those apps, see which ones you still need access to, and if there are any, to switch your login from Facebook to something else so that you can still access it even after you've deleted your Facebook account. And there are just some apps that you won't have access to if you delete your Facebook account. Facebook has a lot of ways to track your activity, even if you're not logged in or if you delete your account entirely. And it uses what it calls the social graph to track the activity of people across the internet beyond just Facebook.com. This accounts for everyone who uses the internet. You don't have to have a Facebook profile to be tracked by Facebook. For example, if your friends have Facebook accounts or Facebook Messenger accounts, and if they've uploaded their contacts to Facebook, and if you're one of their contacts, then Facebook knows your name and your phone number and can track you. When you deactivate or delete your Facebook profile, your profile disappears and people can't see what you posted or search for you, but all of the data that you gave over to third-party app developers is still out there, and those developers are not required to delete it or do anything with it. They can use it however they want for as long as they want. There's a whole list of ways that Facebook will track you outside of Facebook.com. To do the full cleanse, you would have to actually manually block a list of URLs that they use to track you. These are the lengths you'd have to go to if you truly wanted to get off of Facebook's grid.
It's like that axiom of communication, you can't take it back. Once you're out there, you're out there.
Yes.
Once your data's out there, even though you're deleting your account, you're not deleting the data that exists out there and that can still be used.
So what did you discover while we were showing this video?
Well, we run the show onto Facebook on live, and I just realized it's hit our radio show as well as a result of that. Through my Facebook account, since I disabled my app, we haven't been running live on Facebook. Hopefully we're getting there pretty soon to pick up the last part of the show here.
So we experimented on ourselves, and we
did.
We discovered firsthand.
And we made it so we can't go through
difficult.
and even broadcast a show, as it
Right.
were. So hopefully we're on other channels like YouTube and the CEC.
So
get that out there.
what's an alternative to deleting our Facebook accounts then? If we discover that really, and there's, it's the baby, throwing the baby out with the bathwater too. There's so much positive that can come from being connected on Facebook. We discovered just now being able to broadcast being one of those things, right? So if we don't want to delete, then what are we left with?
Well, we're left with making better decisions. We're left with being more critical in terms of how we're putting, there we are, of how we're, that's the wrong show, of how we're putting data out there to begin with.
Okay.
And remembering that a click is a vote. I've said this a number of times on a previous show during the elections. If you don't like something and you click on it, it still trends it in its popularity. So a click is a vote no matter which way you might be thinking about that. As long as you're giving it attention, it trends it up. And anything that trends up, as we've learned with Donald Trump, starts to garner all kinds of accolades and
So
and
where we give
attention
our
that way.
attention is a critical factor.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
And then
Who are you friending?
Then also, Zuckerberg came out and said, I just think the other day, that maybe some regulation is in order. And so what kind of regulation is now probably the question that's going to be on a lot of people's minds. What kind of regulation?
Well,
and
you're talking about filter bubbles. What kind of data needs to be protected?
Well, it was interesting because I think it was Clay Sharkey talking about
Right.
filter bubbles. And the point he was making about that is maybe you can have two places, at least two areas or domains. So you have your circle of friends, which was the idea of Facebook, connect with your friends. Maybe it's okay to have that be a filter bubble or a cocoon of sorts. It's you and your friends and the things you guys agree on and find important amongst yourselves. Then outside of your cocoon or your filter bubble, you go out into the big world like you do in the olden days. You read the paper, you listen to the radio, you talk to people outside your cocoon and your filter bubble, and then you get information that way. So that your cocoon actually has kind of a line of defense around it. It's protected and somewhat more private. And you're not being constantly assaulted with all kinds of messaging that you really don't want. And so I thought that was an interesting way to look at it is, maybe a filter bubble used in a correct way is not a bad idea.
There's some protections that are there.
Right. It kind of like if you go back to the olden days where you had your circle of friends and you thought similar things and had similar values and ideas, but then you can also go out into the big world.
Can't we take a risk with the big world more? Can we entertain ideas that are different than ours?
That's a personal choice. That's a personal choice that you make. Well, that you make, and then you either know more or you know less, like in the olden days.
If you're just joining us on Facebook, it's because I turned off the app. I disabled using apps on Facebook in order to go through and protect my data. And then 2/3 of the way through the show, the producer came out and said, "Did you turn off your app's ability on your Facebook account?" Because we're using my Facebook account to go through and broadcast the show. So welcome back. You missed a lot. So if you get a chance maybe to take a look at, hopefully it went to our YouTube page, or it'll be rebroadcast as well on the CEC. And we'll have hopefully the whole show to go up here on the Facebook feed as well. So we've kind of disabled.
We did a live demo, a real world demonstration of deleting Facebook.
If you want to know how to go through and protect your data a little bit better from those types of algorithms that Cambridge Analytica is putting out there, say for example, if you've ever taken that personality test or trying to figure out what you might look like as a different gender, I put a little tutorial up on our Facebook page that teaches you how to go through and do that as well. And it looks like it's in low resolution, so I have to maybe find a YouTube to put up instead.
Well, so also what we're left with being more critical, we always say as consumers, but also regulation. Now that's I think going to be a topic, and we can kind of look to maybe what they're doing in the EU, because they're a little more skeptical, a little less accepting as a population.
And that's an inherent cultural thing with Europeans,
right,
more so than it is here, in terms of that the skeptic. Yeah.
Well, and rightly so. I mean, they've been through some intense things as a culture related to manipulation and that kind of thing. And then I also had another thought that just sort of flew out my mind on that. But so we'll be looking to that, and it just keeps coming in and out of the edge there. But
you're still in that post-party thing that you've got going on.
My daughter said, "Call it post-party afterglow."
Post-party afterglow.
Yeah, from her birthday.
All right. Well, I think we'll call it a 30-minute show today as we go along. Next week we'll be back. We'll see what pops up between now and then. I didn't make the Russian connection here between Alexander Kogan and the Trump campaign there. There's something interesting to talk about in terms of...
Now, who is he the...
Alexander Kogan was the original scholar who started to do the research to begin with.
Okay.
And then Cambridge Analytica came along and...
So I'm thinking he's a spy. I mean, he's obviously a spy.
Well, there's a link there somewhere, and it's going to go through and I think...
And if he doesn't play ball with the Russians, he'll get poisoned.
Hit the headlines. Yeah, wow. That's something else we probably ought to talk about. Wow, what an interesting time.
Yeah.
It scares me to death here.
Yes.
As we go along.
I'm glad I live in St. George in southern Utah in the U.S.
Do you feel protected down here?
I just really like being here.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Join us next week then at 9:30. We're also being broadcast on Dixie's radio, and I can never remember the numbers on that one. Lauren, what is that? 91.3. Thank you. I'm Eric Young for Talking Point Live, along with
Jennifer Kohler.
And we'll see you next week at 9:30. Thanks for joining us.